What happened when the undercover CEO walked into his own law firm as a regular client? He was ignored, dismissed, and subtly pushed aside simply because of how he looked. Marcus, the CEO of a prestigious firm, had heard rumors of discrimination but needed to see the truth for himself. What he uncovered wasn't just one bad employee, it was a deep-rooted culture of bias, but when he finally revealed his true identity, the entire office was left stunned. What did he do next, and how did he ensure real change? Stay tuned to find out. Marcus had always prided himself on leading a law firm that valued excellence, professionalism, and fairness. As the CEO of one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the country, he believed his company upheld the highest standards of integrity. However, recent complaints had begun to paint a different picture, one that made him question whether his firm was truly living up to its reputation. Reports had surfaced about black clients and job applicants receiving dismissive treatment at one of the firm's top offices, and the accusations were becoming harder to ignore. Some clients claimed they were subtly discouraged from seeking the firm's services, while others felt they were not given the same level of attention as their white counterparts. Marcus knew that leadership required action, not just words. He had spent years building this firm into a powerhouse of legal expertise, but what good was success if bias and discrimination were festering beneath the surface? He also understood that reading reports and conducting formal inquiries wouldn't reveal the full truth. Employees could hide their real attitudes when they knew they were being watched. If there was a culture of bias in his firm, it wasn't something that would be uncovered through a simple meeting. Instead, Marcus made a bold decision. He would go undercover as a potential client. By posing as someone seeking legal representation, he would experience firsthand how his firm treated people when they didn't realize they were speaking to the CEO. It was a risky move, but one he knew was necessary. If discrimination existed within his company, he intended to root it out, starting now. The law firm's headquarters was located in a towering glass skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, a place where high-powered executives and wealthy business owners sought legal counsel for multi-million-dollar deals. The firm prided itself on its elite clientele, boasting a reputation for handling high-stakes corporate litigation and complex mergers. Inside, the office exuded luxury. Polished marble floors reflected the glow of elegant chandeliers, and abstract art pieces adorned the walls. Every detail, from the imported leather chairs in the waiting area to the complimentary espresso bar, was designed to impress. The firm's prestige wasn't just about the quality of its legal services, it was also about maintaining an air of exclusivity. The employees, too, fit the firm's polished image. Lawyers dressed in custom-tailored suits moved through the office with quiet confidence, their conversations laced with legal jargon and talk of powerful clients. Receptionists answered calls with practiced professionalism, and assistants meticulously managed the firm's packed schedules. Clients who entered the firm's office were often greeted warmly, especially if they looked the part. But beneath the professional veneer, Marcus had received troubling reports suggesting that not all clients were treated with the same level of respect. There were whispers that black clients, or those who didn't appear wealthy enough, were subtly discouraged, their cases deemed not a good fit for the firm. Marcus knew that outward appearances could be deceiving. From the outside, the law firm seemed like a beacon of success and professionalism, but if the allegations were true, it meant that a culture of bias had taken root within the very institution he built. To find out the truth, he needed to step into the shoes of an ordinary client. He would experience the firm not as its CEO, but as someone with no connections or influence, just another person seeking legal help. Only then would he uncover what truly happened behind the firm's sleek, high-end facade. Dressed in business casual attire, a simple blazer, slacks, and worn-in leather shoes, Marcus stepped into the lobby of his own law firm, but this time as an outsider. He had deliberately avoided anything that would hint at his wealth or status. No expensive watch, no designer accessories, just a man looking for legal assistance. He wanted to see firsthand if the rumors were true, and within moments, the first signs of bias began to emerge. As he approached the reception desk, he noticed how the receptionist, Victoria, was all smiles and professionalism when speaking to the sharply dressed white client ahead of him. She greeted the man warmly, offering him coffee and assuring him that one of the senior partners would be available shortly. But when Marcus stepped forward, the warmth disappeared. Victoria barely lifted her eyes from her computer screen. "Yes?" she asked flatly, her tone devoid of the friendliness she had just displayed. Marcus kept his composure. "I'm looking for legal representation. I have a business dispute that I'd like to discuss with an attorney." Victoria pursed her lips, looking him over, as if assessing whether he belonged in a firm of this caliber. Instead of asking for details about his case or offering him the same service options she had provided the previous client, she tapped a few keys on her keyboard and said, "We usually handle corporate clients. If you're looking for legal aid, I can give you the number for a smaller firm that might be better suited for your needs." Marcus felt a familiar sting, an all too common experience for many black professionals, even those at the top of their fields. He remained calm, testing the waters further. "I'm interested in hiring one of your senior attorneys. I was referred here," he said, deliberately vague. Victoria sighed, still not offering him a seat or a coffee. "Well, our fees start at a high rate," she said with a forced smile. "Are you sure this is the right place for you?" Marcus's patience thinned. He had built this firm with the belief that it would stand for professionalism and respect, yet here he was, being sized up and dismissed before even being asked about his case. It was clear Victoria had made an assumption about him the moment he walked in, and it had nothing to do with his legal needs. She wasn't looking at him as a potential client. She was looking at him as someone who didn't belong. And this was only the beginning. Marcus took a deep breath, suppressing the frustration rising inside him. He wasn't just being dismissed. He was being categorized, pushed aside based on an assumption. But he wasn't done yet. He decided to press forward, to see just how deep this bias ran. "I understand the firm has high fees," he said, keeping his voice even. "I'd still like to speak with an attorney about my case." Victoria gave a tight-lipped smile, clearly uninterested in helping him. Without checking availability, she muttered, "Our top lawyers are very busy. It might take weeks to schedule something, and we usually prioritize long-term corporate clients." She reached for a stack of generic business cards and slid one across the desk. "If you really want a consultation, you can submit an inquiry online, and someone will get back to you." Marcus arched an eyebrow. He had just watched her arrange an immediate consultation for the previous client. No online inquiries, no vague delays. It was a subtle but clear message. "You're not the kind of client we prioritize." As he waited in the lobby, he observed interactions around him. A well-dressed white couple walked in, and within moments, another receptionist greeted them enthusiastically. "Welcome. Are you here for a consultation? Let me check which attorneys are available." No mention of scheduling delays, no business card deflection, just immediate attention. A few minutes later, a younger black man in his mid-20s entered, wearing a button-down shirt and slacks. He walked up to Victoria's desk, asking about job openings. Without hesitation, she dismissed him. "We're not hiring for any entry-level positions right now," she said before he could even clarify what he was applying for. The man hesitated, then corrected her, saying he was a Harvard law graduate looking for an associate position. Victoria blinked, clearly caught off guard, but instead of apologizing, she simply nodded. "Oh, well, applications are online." Unlike the white candidates who had walked in earlier and were given personal attention, he was given the same brush-off Marcus had received. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The pattern was undeniable. Assumptions were being made based on race, and it was affecting both potential clients and job seekers. This wasn't just one employee's behavior. It reflected a culture that had been allowed to fester unchecked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind already forming a plan. He had seen enough to know that the problem was real. The only question left was, how deep did it go? Marcus sat in the waiting area, carefully observing the firm's interactions. The preferential treatment given to certain clients and applicants had become painfully clear. He had seen enough, but he wanted to push one step further. If bias had become this normalized, how would a senior member of the firm respond? A few minutes later, a tall man in an expensive three-piece suit strode into the lobby. William, one of the firm's senior partners, a name Marcus knew well. William exchanged pleasantries with the receptionists, greeting the white clients warmly before his eyes landed on Marcus. His polite demeanor shifted slightly, replaced with something more distant. He frowned, then walked over. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice edged with skepticism. "Yes," Marcus said, standing up. "I'm looking for legal representation. I wanted to speak with a senior attorney about a corporate dispute." William's lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes scanned Marcus's outfit. Nothing about his appearance should have set off alarm bells, yet it was clear that William had already made up his mind about him. "We typically work with high-profile clients," he said carefully. "We don't usually take on small business cases. Have you looked into firms that specialize in more independent enterprises?" Marcus held his gaze, unblinking. "I never said I owned a small business." William hesitated, then forced a smile. Of course. I just assumed—" "Assumed what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. The moment hung heavy in the air. William opened his mouth as if to explain himself, but closed it again. He had realized his mistake, but too late. Marcus had caught him in the very act of bias he was here to investigate. For a brief moment, silence filled the lobby. The receptionist stiffened at her desk, sensing the shift in the conversation. The other clients continued their business, oblivious to the growing tension. Marcus had seen enough. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an isolated incident. This was a culture, a deeply ingrained pattern of exclusion masked under the firm's polished professionalism. And now, it was time to act. Taking a slow breath, Marcus made his decision. The charade was over. It was time to reveal exactly who he was and confront the reality of what had just happened. Marcus took a step forward, his expression unreadable as he locked eyes with William. The senior partner shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something was off. The air in the lobby had thickened, and the receptionist Victoria sat frozen at her desk, watching the exchange. With deliberate ease, Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped on the screen a few times. Then he turned it around, displaying an official press photo of himself, standing in front of the law firm's headquarters, his name and title. Marcus Bennett, CEO and founder, clearly visible beneath it. William's face was drained of color. Victoria let out a sharp breath, her eyes widening in horror. The other staff members nearby had started to notice the shift in energy, their conversations fading into silence as they turned toward the unfolding confrontation. "Marcus Bennett," William finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. His confident demeanor was gone, replaced by sheer panic. "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "And I've been here for the last 40 minutes watching exactly how this firm treats certain clients." Victoria's mouth opened and closed as if searching for an excuse, but nothing came out. William, too, was momentarily speechless. The weight of the moment settled in, and Marcus let them sit with it. "I came here today not just as the CEO," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "I came as a client, one who was ignored, dismissed, and judged based on appearance alone. And what I seen confirms exactly what I was afraid of." He turned his gaze toward Victoria. "You assumed I wasn't worth your time. You didn't even check to see if my case was something the firm handled. You redirected me elsewhere without a second thought." Then he faced William. "And you? You assumed I wasn't a high-profile client. Without knowing a thing about me, you decided I wasn't worth your time?" The room remained silent. Marcus let their shame sink in. He had built this firm from the ground up with the belief that it would represent excellence, fairness, and professionalism. What he had just experienced proved that those values were being undermined from within. "This firm is my legacy," he said, his voice growing sharper, "and I will not allow it to become a place where bias and exclusion are tolerated." With those final words, the reckoning had begun. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint sound of typing from the receptionist's desk. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a pen, as if grasping for something to anchor herself. William, still pale, cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. But there was no way out of this. The damage had already been done. Marcus took a deep breath, keeping his expression composed but firm. "Effective immediately, Victoria, you are dismissed," he said without hesitation. "This firm does not tolerate discrimination, and your actions today have proven that you are not fit to represent us." Victoria gasped, her face twisting in shock. "Sir, I didn't mean—" Marcus held up a hand, cutting off her excuses. Intentions don't matter when the impact is this clear. You made assumptions about me the moment I walked in, just as you've likely done with countless others. This ends today." He turned his attention to William, who straightened his tie, clearly uneasy. "As for you, William, I'm placing you under review. Your behavior doesn't align with the standards of this firm, and I will be conducting a full investigation into how you and others have handled clients in the past." Whispers spread across the lobby as staff members exchanged nervous glances. The weight of Marcus's words was sinking in. This wasn't just a scolding, it was a reckoning. Employees who had grown comfortable in the firm's unspoken biases now realized that change was coming, whether they liked it or not. Marcus glanced around the office, his voice resolute. "This firm will be better than this, starting now." The next morning, Marcus stood at the front of the firm's largest conference room, facing an uneasy crowd of employees. Every attorney, paralegal, and staff member had been called in for a mandatory meeting. The tension in the air was palpable. News of yesterday's events had already spread like wildfire. Some employees looked nervous, while others sat stiffly, arms crossed, clearly resistant to what was coming. Marcus let the silence hang for a moment before he spoke. "Yesterday, I walked into this firm, not as your CEO, but as a potential client. And what I experienced was discrimination, plain and simple." His voice was steady, but the weight of his words pressed down on the room. It wasn't just one person's mistake. It was a reflection of a culture that has been allowed to fester here. And that stops now. Murmurs rippled through the room, but Marcus continued. "Effective immediately, we are implementing mandatory diversity and bias training for every single employee, from senior partners to receptionists, no exceptions. We are also launching an internal review of client interactions and hiring practices to identify and eliminate discriminatory behavior." He scanned the room, making eye contact with employees one by one. If anyone believes they can continue operating under the old ways, belittling clients, making assumptions about who belongs here and who doesn't, let me be clear, you will not have a place in this firm. The room fell silent. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably, but one thing was certain. Change was no longer an option. It was a requirement. Marcus had taken the first step in reshaping the firm's culture, and from this moment forward, there was no turning back. The story of Marcus going undercover in his own law firm highlights a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the importance of actively confronting discrimination. It proves that even in prestigious institutions, bias can persist beneath a polished surface, subtly shaping interactions and excluding those who do not fit a certain expectation. One of the key takeaways is that true leadership requires more than just setting policies, it demands direct involvement. Marcus could have relied on reports and secondhand accounts, but by experiencing the issue firsthand, he gained undeniable proof of the problem. This reinforces the idea that leaders must be willing to step into uncomfortable situations to fully understand and address systemic issues. Another lesson is that change must be both immediate and long-term. Firing one discriminatory employee is not enough. Organizations must actively reshape their culture through training, accountability, and clear consequences for misconduct. Marcus's decision to implement firm-wide reforms demonstrates that real transformation requires persistence and commitment. Ultimately, the story underscores that silence and complacency allow discrimination to thrive. Those in positions of power have a responsibility to challenge injustice and ensure that fairness, respect, and inclusivity are not just ideals but everyday realities.